The story of Noah's Ark, as recounted in the book of Genesis, is one of the most enduring and well-known narratives in human history. It tells the tale of a righteous man, Noah, chosen by God to build a massive ark to save his family and representatives of all living creatures from a catastrophic flood. The flood, brought about by God's judgment upon a world consumed by wickedness, covered the entire earth, wiping out all life except for those aboard the ark. The Genesis account paints a vivid picture of the flood's destructive power and the utter devastation it wrought. It describes the rising waters, the relentless rain, and the desperate plight of those who perished. Yet amidst the chaos and destruction, the story also offers a glimmer of hope. The ark, a symbol of God's mercy and protection, serves as a vessel of salvation, preserving a remnant of life from the watery abyss. The flood narrative is not merely a story of destruction, however, it is also a story of renewal and a new beginning. After the floodwaters recede, God establishes a covenant with Noah and his descendants, promising never again to destroy the earth with a flood. This covenant, symbolized by the rainbow, represents a fresh start for humanity and a pledge of God's enduring love and faithfulness. The story of Noah's Ark, therefore, is a complex and multifaceted narrative that explores themes of judgment, mercy, and the enduring power of hope. The story of Noah's Ark is rich in symbolism, with the ark itself serving as a central and enduring image. The ark, often interpreted as a microcosm of creation, represents both the fragility of life and the possibility of redemption. The animals brought aboard, 2 of each kind, highlight the diversity of God's creation and the importance of preserving life in all its forms. The ark's dimensions, meticulously described in Genesis, have also been the subject of much interpretation. Some scholars see symbolic significance in the numbers, linking them to themes of divine order and cosmic harmony. Others focus on the ark's structure, viewing its 3 decks as a representation of the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. Beyond the physical structure, the act of building the ark takes on symbolic meaning. Noah's obedience to God's command, despite the seemingly impossible task before him, speaks to the importance of faith and trust in the divine plan. The ark's construction, a monumental undertaking, symbolizes humanity's role as stewards of creation, entrusted with the responsibility to care for and protect the natural world. The flood itself carries symbolic weight, often interpreted as a cleansing force, washing away the wickedness and corruption that had overtaken humanity. The floodwaters, while destructive, also represent a return to a primordial state, a symbolic undoing of creation that paves the way for a new beginning. To fully understand the story of Noah's Ark, it's essential to consider the historical and cultural context in which it was written. The Genesis account, part of the Hebrew Bible, emerged from an ancient Near Eastern world where flood narratives were a common motif in mythology and folklore. These stories, often featuring gods angered by human transgression, served as cautionary tales, reminding people of the consequences of wickedness and the importance of respecting divine authority. The Genesis flood narrative, while sharing similarities with other ancient flood myths, also exhibits distinct characteristics. Unlike many Mesopotamian accounts, which often portray the gods as capricious and vengeful, the God of Genesis is depicted as just and merciful, offering humanity a chance for redemption even in the face of their sinfulness. The Genesis account also emphasizes the covenant God makes with Noah after the flood, a unique element that highlights the importance of God's relationship with humanity. This covenant, a promise of future blessing and protection, sets the stage for the unfolding narrative of the Hebrew Bible, laying the foundation for God's ongoing relationship with his chosen people. Understanding the ancient Near Eastern context of the flood narrative helps to illuminate its literary and theological significance. By recognizing the common themes and motifs shared with other ancient flood myths, we can better appreciate the unique message of the Genesis account and its enduring impact on Western thought and culture. The question of whether the flood described in Genesis was a historical event or a symbolic narrative has been a subject of ongoing debate. Those who interpret the Bible literally often point to geological features like canyons and fossil deposits as evidence of a catastrophic global flood. They argue that these features could only have been formed by a massive deluge, supporting the biblical account. However, the scientific community largely views the geological evidence through the lens of uniformitarianism, the principle that the same natural processes operating today have shaped the Earth throughout its history. Geologists explain the formation of canyons, mountains, and fossil layers through gradual processes like erosion, plate tectonics, and sedimentation, occurring over millions of years. While there's evidence of regional floods throughout history, the scientific consensus is that there's no geological evidence to support a global flood on the scale described in Genesis. The amount of water required to cover the entire Earth, including the highest mountains, is simply not supported by the planet's hydrological cycle. Furthermore, the fossil record, which shows a gradual progression of life forms over millions of years, contradicts the idea of a single catastrophic flood that wiped out all life on Earth. The distribution of plant and animal species across different continents also poses challenges to the idea of a single ark carrying representatives of all living creatures. Section 5. An Ark of Immense Proportions, Feasibility and Logistics. The Genesis account describes the ark as a massive wooden vessel, 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. These dimensions have led to numerous attempts to calculate the ark's volume and assess the feasibility of housing two of every kind of animal. While the exact conversion of cubits to modern units is debated, even conservative estimates suggest an ark of immense size, capable of holding a significant number of animals. However, the logistics of gathering, caring for, and preserving the genetic diversity of an estimated 8 million animal species within the confines of the ark present significant challenges. Critics point to the logistical difficulties of providing food, water, and waste disposal for such a diverse menagerie, as well as the challenges of maintaining appropriate environmental conditions for animals with vastly different needs. The ark's limited space raises questions about how animals with large territories or specialized diets could have survived. Furthermore, the biblical account doesn't specify how animals from remote islands or geographically isolated regions would have reached the ark. The challenges of animal migration and the potential for inbreeding within a limited gene pool also raise doubts about the ark's ability to repopulate the Earth with such a small number of individuals. Section 6. The Flood's Aftermath. Imagining the Environmental Impact. The flood narrative describes a cataclysmic event that reshaped the Earth's surface and profoundly impacted the planet's ecosystems. If we imagine a global flood on the scale described in Genesis, the environmental consequences would have been devastating and far-reaching. The sheer volume of water required to cover the entire Earth would have inundated continents, eroded mountains, and deposited vast quantities of sediment, dramatically altering landscapes. The floodwaters would have mixed with saltwater oceans, creating a brackish environment hostile to many freshwater species. The sudden disappearance of plant life, a vital food source for many animals, would have triggered widespread starvation and ecological collapse. The decomposition of billions of dead animals and plants would have released massive amounts of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, potentially triggering rapid climate change. The flood's impact on soil fertility and the distribution of plant and animal species would have made it challenging for life to re-establish itself. The post-flood world would have been a harsh and unforgiving environment, requiring significant adaptations for surviving species to thrive. Section 7. Time and Creation, Reconciling Young Earth and Old Earth Views. The interpretation of the Genesis flood narrative is often intertwined with beliefs about the age of the Earth. Young Earth creationists, who interpret the Bible literally and believe the Earth is only a few thousand years old, view the flood as a recent, catastrophic event that explains the Earth's geological features and the fossil record. Old Earth creationists, on the other hand, accept the scientific consensus that the Earth is billions of years old. They tend to interpret the flood narrative more symbolically or as a localized event, reconciling their faith with scientific evidence. The different interpretations of the flood narrative highlight the ongoing dialogue between faith and science. While some seek to harmonize the biblical account with scientific findings, others maintain that the Bible is not a scientific textbook and should not be interpreted literally. The question of how to reconcile religious beliefs with scientific discoveries is a complex one with no easy answers. It requires careful consideration of the different ways we interpret texts and evidence, as well as a willingness to engage in respectful dialogue and critical thinking. Section 8. Bridging the Divide, Faith and Science in Dialogue. The story of Noah's Ark often sits at the intersection of faith and science, sparking debate and prompting questions about the relationship between these two ways of understanding the world. While some view faith and science as fundamentally incompatible, others see them as complementary lenses through which to explore the mysteries of existence. Those who approach the flood narrative from a scientific perspective often focus on the geological and logistical challenges it presents. They rely on empirical evidence and the scientific method to evaluate the feasibility of a global flood and the Ark's ability to preserve all species. Those who approach the story from a faith perspective often emphasize its theological and symbolic significance. They focus on themes of judgment, mercy, and the importance of obedience to God. They may view the flood narrative as an allegory or a parable, conveying spiritual truths rather than historical facts. It's important to acknowledge that faith and science operate within different realms of inquiry. Science seeks to understand the natural world through observation, experimentation, and the development of testable explanations. Faith, on the other hand, deals with questions of ultimate meaning, purpose, and the nature of reality, often relying on revelation, tradition, and personal experience. Section 9. A Beacon of Hope, Finding Meaning in the Flood Narrative. Despite the ongoing debates surrounding its historicity and scientific plausibility, the story of Noah's Ark continues to resonate with people across cultures and generations. It offers profound insights into the human condition, exploring themes of sin, judgment, redemption, and the enduring power of hope. At its core, the flood narrative reminds us of the consequences of wickedness and the importance of living a righteous life. It highlights the destructive nature of sin, not only on an individual level but also on a societal and even cosmic scale. The flood, a symbol of God's judgment upon a corrupt world, serves as a sobering reminder of the need for repentance and renewal. However, the story also offers a message of hope and God's unwavering faithfulness. Noah, chosen for his righteousness, represents the possibility of living a life pleasing to God even in a world consumed by wickedness. The Ark, a symbol of God's mercy and protection, reminds us that even in the midst of judgment, God provides a way of escape for those who trust in Him. The covenant God establishes with Noah after the flood is a testament to His enduring love for humanity. The rainbow, a symbol of hope and promise, reminds us that God is always faithful to His word, and that His plans for creation are ultimately good.